we're going to move into a kind of more intensive series of 10-minute sessions. And so I'm really excited. We have Daniel Stein, who's going to be joining us next. And Daniel's going to give us some information about how we can grow cannabis with our food. So we're going to have a really nice permaculture conversation. And again, moving to the front is very helpful. It allows you to hear the speaker and to ask questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Daniel Stein. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Casey, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's good. Hey, I'm Daniel Stein, and I'm joined here with my friend Casey O'Neill. Both of us are diversified cannabis farmers, meaning we grow both cannabis and veggie and other food crops economically and on a production scale at our farms. So our session here is a brief session talking about that, talking about growing food with cannabis, why you would grow food with cannabis, how you would grow food with cannabis, things to think about with that. So just to think a little bit about the why, farming in this country has changed over the last 100 years or so. Farms are getting bigger and bigger, and the number of farmers are getting smaller and smaller. And what we know from lessons with biodiversity that biodiversity is resilience, and a lot of small farms is food security for this country and food security for our communities, and it is a better quality of food. Because when we look out there, when we look at these big farms, these aren't the people that care about our health. These aren't the people that are our neighbors that are eating the food that they produce. So coming from a point of view for me, that the motivation and the desire to grow food and sustain my family and my community, as well as growing cannabis, comes from that. I want a connection to the earth, to the food I'm eating, and I want to be able to share that with my community and with my neighbors, to be able to share that self-sufficiency and that empowerment that comes with creating your own food, knowing where your food comes from, and having a connection with it. So I'll give Casey a minute to talk about his motivation with food farming.
You know, I think it's this combined aspect of community and culture that we're all working on. That's part of what brings us all together. Cannabis has been this process of coming together, of working together under prohibition, this movement that we are trying to carry forward. And food is about as integral of a part of that as can get. Everybody, you know, that's one thing that we all have in common. And this process of community is built slowly, and it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy. And food production, for us, I think, you know, going to farmers market and having that connection across the table is a big part of that process. That's it's pretty magic. And so, you know, I like to think of the sort of the cycle of energy and of energetics, in which I'm putting this love and good energy into the food that I produce that goes out to provide nourishment to the community, and we're consuming that and we're putting that love and energy into the cannabis. And these cycles, these processes, are a way of uplifting ourselves. And it's also this idea of stacking functions, of being able to have multiple things happening at the same time. A diversified crop portfolio is a much more stable farm organism. And so both in different seasons and then in different spaces within the garden, we're able to produce more than we otherwise would be able to. So, you know, I think it's an interesting journey in which, like 10 years ago, I really wasn't farming food, and it's been, you know, to go through that process of becoming a farmer has been, I think, the most powerful experience of my life. And so I would, you know, just highly support and suggest any form of food cultivation. Like, getting into that loop is it's a pretty magical experience.
Yeah, and we're here. I know some of you are cannabis farmers, and some of you are cannabis consumers, but and many are both. But one of the things that cannabis can be the gateway drug for gardening. It's like a lot of people learn to grow something by growing cannabis, and now you have those skills. Like, you've grown something, you've grown some medicine, now you can grow some food too. And those of us who have spent our time acquiring the skills to produce, to bring something from the earth that we can share for our minds, for our bodies, to create that skill, it's now something you have to offer the world, something you have to offer the community. And if you're offering it in terms of medicine, you can offer that in terms of food too. And it's not that big of a jump to go from cannabis to food production. So there's a few things, making that jump from cannabis to food production, there's a few like key elements. If you're trying to do food production that is economically viable as a farmer, it is, even though the quality of our food puts us in a different category, we are still competing with industrial production agriculture. The prices that people pay for food are reflective of industrialization. So even on a farmer's market level, we want to provide affordable food for our friends and neighbors. We want to provide something that people can make that choice, not only for their health, but for their pocketbook, and buy good food. So, and these are lessons to learn this that will adapt to cannabis as well, because as cannabis becomes more of an industry and more of a production, we know prices are likely to come down, and the lessons from production agriculture are really going to take effect in the cannabis community. And those lessons are, you need to be very observant, you need to be very creative, and you need to be very efficient. You need to think about production agriculture in your time and pay yourself as much as you can, pay yourself a living wage for what you're doing. And when it comes to selling lettuce, you know, it's a challenge. You have to really think about your systems. You have to think about time and space. Or when a head of lettuce comes out, another one's going in. So that amount of space you have is always growing a crop for you, and considerations like that. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of really creative people working on small farm and micro farm levels on not only how to do production food farming that's economically viable, but also how to do that in the right way, how to do it no-till, so you're building a living soil food organism, and many other things. And I'll talk some more about that in my regen talk later on tonight, but there's a lot of information out there. And
so they say in food farming, when you're looking for a niche, early, late, or ornate. You want to hit something that, you know, trying to sell tomatoes at the end of August is tough. And so one of the things that was interesting for me getting into farming is I had all these feels about like competing with other farmers. And in observing what my microclimate is capable of accomplishing, I really found that there was a niche that was very available to me. We're up on a ridge line. We've got very warm nights, and so hot crops do very well for us: tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, those types of things. And a lot of the other farmers that I'm working around are in the valley, and they have the cool nights, and so they're doing things like lettuce that I can't do in the summertime, but they're not really doing production tomatoes. So there's often like a niche that's very available that's just waiting for somebody to step into. And as the population of farmers in this country continues to age, there's a tremendous need for young people who are getting into farming and who are trying to find a niche. And one of the things that was really special to me was to find that a lot of these older farmers are exceptionally supportive. And so you come into it with this feeling of like, oh man, I'm coming into this competitive situation, and it's actually this like sharing and this love that's just a very powerful experience. And so we're both very accessible on IG or Facebook. Reach out, like we're happy to bounce questions back and forth and talk about farming and just to continue that sharing process.
Yeah, and we can touch a bit on specifically farming with cannabis as part of your farming system. So I've been working with a number of different systems and ways to do that on our farm. We've been doing a lot of experimenting, but one of the neat things with cannabis is if you're growing outdoor cannabis, it has an arc through the season. It starts really small and it ends up really big. So in the spring, when cannabis is quite small, there's a lot of open space around it, whether it's in the bed or in beds next to it. The spring's also a great time for a lot of quick turnaround crops: radishes, arugula, lettuce mix, things like that. So we'll plant those crops in between our cannabis, and as our cannabis grows and expands, those crops are being harvested and replaced with a summertime cover crop that can fill that area as the cannabis expands and shades it out. And then for us, what we do is the next season, the beds that were the production crop and then a cover crop and then a winter cover crop gets cannabis. So it's had greens, a summer cover crop of buckwheat, a winter cover crop of legumes, and then the next year it's cannabis, and the bed that was the cannabis the previous year starts the rotation of veggies, cover crops, building up the soil for the cannabis rotation, because cannabis is a very long-lived heavy feeder. It's kind of similar to tomatoes, different than tomatoes in a lot of ways, but similar in that it spends a long time in the soil, and it uses a lot of nutrients. So doing cannabis with an on-farm fertility system where you're trying to provide everything that it has, you have to spend time building the soil up for it.
So season extension is another big potential. We do a lot of just really quick hoops. So it's a half-inch metal conduit with a pipe bender. So you bend a hoop. You got a 4-foot wide bed top. Run metal hoops every 6 to 8 feet, depending on whether you got snow load or not, and run a frost blanket over the top. And it'll give you a significant ability to extend your season both before and after. And so that potential is something that we utilize a lot to be able to harvest winter crops. You know, especially here on the West Coast, like. This is about as an ideal of an agricultural climate as you can ask for. It's a true Mediterranean climate. And so with a little bit of season extension, you can pull stuff that's archetypal, just these incredible veggies. Yeah. And so that process of just like simple, cheap, quick infrastructure and being able to rotate it around and make as much use of your space as possible. Like Daniel said, we try to pull multiple crops out of the same space. And this is one of the things, you know, there's this whole like, well, small farms can't feed the world. And that's actually, that's bullshit. And so the reality of it is we're able to grow more food because we can utilize the same space more because it's a smaller scale. And that potential is something that I would highly encourage. Like neither of us cultivate. If you're about an acre, I'm about an acre. Like we're both very, very small scale, and we're able to produce a heck of a lot of food for the community and for ourselves. And so, you know, I think there's no patch that's too small, and there's a lot of potential out of it. So. Again, you know, I just would like highly encourage it. It's a lot of fun. We got about 1 minute.
Okay. So, is there any questions? We have a minute.
Kristen, do we have time for Q&A or is it just not? Okay.
Cool. Anybody got any questions? And if you want to join us, we'll be stepping outside into the Rage Lounge. You can continue the conversation, look at some cover crops and other stuff going on out there. Just say real quick, if there's no questions, a big part of farming is systems. It's like developing, and that comes back to the efficiency again. It's developing systems that you know will work, observing how they work, observing how they don't work, and tweaking them. You need to deliver water, you need to protect your plants from heat, whatever, like Casey was saying, row covers, things that are adaptable and reliable so that you know you can achieve consistent results with it. So,
great success.
Anything I want?